Chapter 1. Under the blood-red light screen, in a misty forest, two teenagers were in their teens. Both of them had unkempt hair and dirty faces. Their clothes were ragged, and some parts of their bodies were even wrapped in tree bark. Their bodies were riddled with scars. But the two didn't care about this because they were fighting. The battle between the two of them did not have any exquisite moves, nor did it have any powerful aura. There was only the viciousness of their fists hitting the flesh and the ruthlessness of their moves. There was a square box lying on the ground beside them, and a faint golden light was flickering on its surface. There were also a few cold bodies lying nearby. They were fighting over this box. "Ling Shiqi, you've been away from the team for a few days and haven't eaten. You and I have the same cultivation, but I have more stamina than you. Give up, if you keep fighting, you'll be the one to die." The youth with the broken sword was gradually unable to hold on and shouted. "No 31, are you scared? On this blood-mist island, only one of us can live." Ling Shiqi's eyes flashed fiercely as he said coldly. Then he sent out his right palm that flashed with spirit light. "You're courting death." No 31 stabbed out with the broken sword in his hand. Although it was a broken sword, the sword style was fierce. Unexpectedly, Ling Shiqi didn't dodge and allowed the broken sword to leave a long sword mark in front of him. At the same time, Ling Shiqi's palm hit No 31's left shoulder. Crazy. No 31 didn't think that Ling Shiqi would dare to exchange injury for injury and take a solid hit. At this moment, his entire left arm drooped down and was temporarily crippled. He knew that this was Ling Shiqi's spirit technique, threefold water wave palm. 3 palm strikes in a row, each one stronger than the last. Ling Shiqi didn't say a word, the spirit light in his right palm flashed again. Seeing that Ling Shiqi wasn't going to let him go, No 31's eyes showed a bit of madness. "Ha!" He roared and stabbed out with the broken sword, aiming for Ling Shiqi's heart. Bang! Poochie! Ling Shiqi's palm hit Wu 31's body. At the same time, a hidden force rushed into his body, shattering his heart meridians. However, Ling Shiqi was also stabbed in the heart by the broken sword. Both sides suffered great losses. "Are you satisfied now? Cough, we'll die together, but the cultivation technique will be taken advantage of by others." Wu 31 said unwillingly, his voice getting weaker and weaker. Ling Shiqi continued to bleed from the corner of his mouth, but he smiled coldly. "No, my threefold palms have already shattered your heart meridians. You are dead for sure. But didn't you notice that your sword had stabbed into something? You. Wu 31 finally realized that his broken sword had stabbed into something hard. Then, he spat out a big mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. However, Ling Shiqi did not have a good time either. Although the heart protection mirror in front of his chest helped him block the fatal blow, No 31's sword did indeed pierce his heart. Even though it was just a little bit, it made him weak and bleed non-stop. Ling Shiqi's eyes flashed with a strong desire to live. He covered his wound with one hand, trying to reduce the bleeding as much as possible. At the same time, he picked up the square box on the ground, the broken sword and the bag on Wu 31 and was about to leave. He suddenly heard a few footsteps. Someone is coming. What do I do? Ling Shiqi could not help but panic. In his current state, he could not run fast. In his panic, a mouthful of blood rushed up to his throat. At this moment, a cold voice sounded in his mind. "Dong. Fantasy lottery system activated. Activating the system to give you a free unlimited lottery. 1 initial bag. The system has detected that the host's vital signs are severely declining. 10 system coins will be used to treat the host." Then, a warm current suddenly appeared in his body. The injuries on his body quickly healed. The fatal wound on his heart was also healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Ling Shiqi did not know the specific reason, but now was not the time to think about it. Taking advantage of the fact that the others had not arrived, he used all his strength to enter the nearby forest. In the forest, Ling Shiqi ran with familiarity. Not long after, he arrived in front of a towering tree that required several people to wrap their arms around it. Using the last bit of spiritual energy in his body, he jumped up and landed on a thick branch. Soon after, he leaped up continuously and landed on a high branch. Pulling aside the thick leaves, he revealed a dark hole. Ling Shiqi did not hesitate to enter. This was a tree hole that he found by chance. It was his hiding place. The tree hole was dark, cold and damp, but Ling Shiqi felt unusually warm. Because, he was finally safe. Finally, he survived. After resting for a while, Ling Shiqi finally breathed a sigh of relief. The first thing he immediately thought of was the thing that saved his life, the system. When he thought of the system, a translucent light screen appeared in front of him. The words, Fantasy Lottery System, were written on it. Below it was his own information, name, Ling Shiqi, Lu Xingji, cultivation level, spirit gathering level 7 cultivation method, unranked cultivation method spiritual chi technique item, starter gift pack system currency, -10. Seeing this, Ling Shiqi's first reaction was not excitement or surprise. Instead, he thought of a question. When was the system activated? How did it activate? For him who had transmigrated, the word system was not unfamiliar. It was not strange for him to have a cheat when he transmigrated. But he had been in this world for almost a year. Why did the system suddenly activate at this time? After thinking for a while, Ling Shiqi was suddenly shocked and muttered to himself. Could it be that the system only activates when I am on the verge of death? No, if I had more spiritual energy at number 31, or if I did not have the heart protection mirror, I would really be dead. Thinking of the heart protection mirror, he reached out and took out a silver heart protection mirror. The heart protection mirror was the size of a palm. It was smooth, but there was a hole in the middle. Ling Shiqi stared at the heart protection mirror. He could not help but feel a chill on his back and gasped. His heart was injured at that time, so he must have bled. But now, there was not a trace of blood on the heart protection mirror. The system suddenly activated because it absorbed the blood from my heart. A system that could only be activated by absorbing the blood from one's heart did not look like a good person. For a moment, Ling Shiqi felt a little uneasy. He lowered his head slightly and thought about how to deal with the system. Forget it. The system's appearance is a great opportunity for me. Even if its appearance is very strange, even if it will harm me in the future, at least it saved me once. Moreover, in a dangerous place like Blood Mist Island, it is not up to me. I just want to live. Thinking of this, Ling Shiqi felt a little relieved. He then sat cross-legged and recovered his spiritual energy. On Blood Mist Island, he had to keep himself in peak condition as much as possible. This was a lesson learned by blood. After about 2 hours, Ling Shiqi's spiritual energy was fully recovered. Only then did he call out the system to study it. First of all, Ling Shiqi was very satisfied that the system could not speak. This meant that the system did not have a consciousness of its own. Moreover, his system was very simple. It was like a very ordinary game interface. Some places were directly explained with words. The core of the fantasy lucky draw system was the word lucky draw. The lottery required the use of system coins. System coins could only be obtained by selling items to the system. The prizes from the lottery were all from fictional worlds. Currently, the system could only perform the beginner lottery, which required 10 system coins. When Ling Shiqi saw that his system coins were -10, he could not help but shake his head with a bitter smile. Now, he could not even try because the system had already overdrawn 10 system coins to heal him. Then, Ling Shiqi took out the broken sword that he had just snatched. Then, a line of words appeared on the system screen. It is worth 3 system coins. Would you like to sell it? No. Ling Shiqi quickly said. One had to know how rare a weapon was on Blood Fog Island. Even a broken sword was relatively precious. He could not just sell it casually. According to the system's calculation, he had to sell 7 items of the same value as the broken sword to be able to draw once. Obviously, it was unrealistic to rely on the system coins for the lottery in a short period of time. Fortunately, the system had just notified him that there was a free lottery and a novice gift bag. Leng Shiqi took a deep breath. With a look of anticipation, he clicked on the lottery page. There were only two options. One was the beginner lottery, which was currently grayed out. The other was unlimited lottery. There was a question mark at the end. Unlimited lottery? Leng Shiqi was a little confused. He immediately clicked on the question mark at the end. Unlimited lottery is a lottery option that costs 1,000 system coins. It will be free when the system is first activated or upgraded. Unlimited lottery means that there is no upper or lower limit. It is possible to draw a god-level prize or a beginner prize. Leng Shiqi's eyes narrowed slightly. The system's words revealed a lot of information. The system will be free to upgrade, which means that the system can be upgraded. There are also different levels of lottery. There might be a god-level lottery in the future. This unlimited lottery depends a little on luck. The upper limit is very high, and the lower limit is also very low. Whether I win or lose depends entirely on luck. I wonder how my luck is. Leng Shiqi raised his hand, pointed at unlimited lottery, and pressed it down. Unlimited lottery, begin. When Leng Shiqi clicked on the lottery option, the system flashed with a rainbow-colored light. After a few seconds, the light suddenly disappeared. Congratulations to the host for drawing a god-level prize, unlimited skill points. Activating the spiritual skill supplementary system in advance. Chapter 2. A God-tier prize? Unlimited skill points? Leng Shiqi could not help but exclaim. However, he immediately covered his mouth. Although the tree hole was hidden, his voice could still be heard. It would be bad if someone was nearby. His eyes were filled with disbelief. He had drawn a god-tier prize. What was unlimited skill points? In his previous life, he had played many games. Skill points were very important resources in games. They could even determine the development direction of a character in the game. Even though he had lived 2 lives, experienced time travel, lost his memory, and fought for nearly a year on Blood Fog Island, he could not help but lose his composure. However, this was not a game, but a real world. He did not know if unlimited skill points would make a difference. Leng Shiqi immediately found a new, spiritual skill system in the system. There was only one spiritual skill in it. Unranked spiritual skill, threefold palm, mastery plus. The bottom right corner showed the number of skill points, 999999999. Seeing the series of numbers, Leng Shiqi took a few deep breaths and forced himself to calm down. Then, he looked at the plus sign behind the word mastery. He subconsciously reached out his finger and tapped on the plus sign. In the next moment, Leng Shiqi's vision turned black. He felt the world spin. In the blink of an eye, he was in a gray space, and he was standing straight here. However, Leng Shiqi found that he could not control himself at all. He could not even move his finger or blink his eyes. Faced with this situation, Leng Shiqi quickly calmed down. This body is not my body. So my consciousness has been pulled into this space? What does this have to do with leveling up spiritual skills? Leng Shiqi thought to himself, carefully observing and analyzing. Then, himself suddenly began to move. Leng Shiqi raised his arm. His palm flashed with spiritual light, and he suddenly slapped out. Then, he slapped out 2 more times. This is the threefold water ripple palm. What a strange feeling. I can't control this body, but I can feel every movement clearly. It's as if I'm doing it myself. Gradually, Leng Shiqi found that his movements were becoming more and more skillful. The connection between each palm was becoming smoother and smoother. Not long after, he had performed several sets of threefold palms. Then, the Leng Shiqi's movements became faster and faster, as if time had sped up. I see. Leng Shiqi seemed to understand something. After Ling Shiqi practiced the threefold water ripple palm over 100 times, his vision went black again, and his consciousness returned to his body. Ling Shiqi immediately stood up after getting used to it. He poked his head out to observe the sky for a while before retracting it. It seems like it hasn't been that long, he muttered to himself. After he left the gray space, the first thing he thought of was if his consciousness entered the gray space to cultivate spiritual techniques, what would he do if his main body encountered danger? Fortunately, it didn't take long. Next time, I'll have to think of a way to test the approximate time. Then, he opened the system page to take a look. The threefold water ripple palms level had indeed become small success. As expected of a god-tier prize. The cultivation of spiritual techniques in this world was divided into 5 stages: beginner, expert, small success, large success, and great perfection. Generally speaking, no matter how talented you were, as long as you worked hard, you could cultivate your spiritual technique to the small success stage. The only difference was the amount of time it would take. However, if you wanted to cultivate to the large success stage, or even the higher great perfection stage, just hard work wasn't enough. You also needed to understand and feel. To put it bluntly, it was about comprehension. The higher one's comprehension, the smoother their cultivation of spiritual techniques would be. But on Blood Fog Island, even people with high comprehension didn't have much time to cultivate their spiritual techniques. This was because just surviving would take up a lot of time. Survival, cultivation, and healing were at the top of the list. Cultivation of spiritual techniques came last. Therefore, Ling Shiqi cultivated the threefold water ripple palm for more than half a year before he reached the expert stage. Then, Ling Shiqi tidied up the things in the tree hole, including the broken sword, wooden box, and some food and water. He used a very thin soft branch to tie these things together and tied them to the top of the tree hole. Ling Shiqi estimated that if this continued, the branch would break in about 10 breaths. Taking advantage of this, he hurriedly opened the system and chose to upgrade the threefold water ripple palm again. As expected, Ling Shiqi's consciousness came to the gray space again. This time, he was a little more used to it. Ling Shiqi began to cultivate the threefold water ripple palm without hesitation. His movements were also much faster. What was different this time was that a part of the comprehension also entered Ling Shiqi's mind. It was as if he had comprehended it himself. After an unknown amount of time, Ling Shiqi's consciousness returned. The first thing he did was to look up. The things that were tied up were still hanging on the tree. After a few breaths, the branch broke and the things fell. Although Ling Shiqi had some guesses before, he was still shocked when he saw this result. It seems that the time I spent in the gray space was very short. I'm afraid it was only 3 or 4 breaths. In the dark tree hole, Ling Shiqi's eyes were abnormally bright. Again. After a few breaths, his threefold water ripple palm had reached the great perfection realm. Moreover, he unexpectedly felt that his arms seemed to have become a little stronger. It wasn't an obvious increase in strength. It was the kind of feeling that one's muscles would naturally become stronger after practicing martial arts for a long time. At this time, Ling Shiqi was very curious. How many people could cultivate a non-ranked spiritual technique to the great perfection realm? People with this kind of understanding wouldn't waste time cultivating such a low-ranked spiritual technique to this level. And those with bad understanding wouldn't be able to cultivate it to the great perfection realm. Of course, he was looking forward to the power of the threefold water ripple palm at the great perfection realm. Unfortunately, he couldn't know until he fought it. After collecting his thoughts, Ling Shiqi began to count his other gains. He first called out the system and opened the free starter gift bag. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a fine iron sword, basic sword technique, 3 golden sword medicine, and 3 spirit recovery powder. Would you like to receive them? Yes. Immediately, a sword, a white book, and 6 small bags suddenly appeared in front of Ling Shiqi. Ling Shiqi picked up the fine iron sword and casually tested it a few times. He felt that it was quite comfortable and circulated his spiritual energy into the fine iron sword. It's a spiritual weapon, a level 1 spiritual weapon. Ling Shiqi's brows furrowed in joy. Weapons on Blood Mist Island were rare resources. It was already rare to have an ordinary weapon that wasn't ranked, and a genuine spiritual weapon was even rarer. The 3 yellow paper bags contained golden sore medicine, and the 3 white paper bags contained spirit recovery powder. One for healing, one for restoring spiritual energy, one for external application, and one for oral consumption. They seemed to be a good match. Ling Shiqi nodded in satisfaction. Then he picked up the broken sword from before and the message appeared in front of him again. It's worth 3 system coins. Would you like to sell it? Yes. The broken sword in his hand suddenly disappeared without a trace. Ling Shiqi's pupils couldn't help but shrink. Then, many thoughts flashed through his mind. Where did the things given by the system come from? Where did the things that were sold to the system go? Creating things out of thin air and disappearing into thin air. What level of cultivation does one have to be to do this? Ling Shiqi thought about a lot of things. In the end, he decided that he shouldn't rely on the system too much in the future. He should always be vigilant against the system. Finally, Ling Shiqi picked up the shining golden box that he had risked his life to obtain. Chapter 3. In the center of Blood Fog Island, there was a 5-story blood tower. Every half a month, it would spit out all kinds of cultivation resources for everyone to fight over. After nearly a year of experience, everyone knew that different colors corresponded to different cultivation resources. Among them, the gold color corresponded to a cultivation technique manual. Ling Shiqi, who had been cultivating for nearly a year, urgently wanted to obtain a cultivation technique because the current cultivation techniques were too lousy. Ling Shiqi opened the box. Inside lay a yellow-covered book. Upon closer inspection, one could see that the corners were a little damaged. The words, "mountain-shattering energy," were written on the cover. Suddenly, Ling Shiqi found that his state of mind had improved a lot. If he had not obtained the system, he would have been wild with joy, but now he was very calm. Ling Shiqi smiled and picked up the cultivation technique manual. The golden light on the box disappeared. He opened the first page of the cultivation technique and raised it above his head. With the help of the faint light outside the tree hole, he slowly studied it. He read for about 2 hours. Ling Shiqi only put down the cultivation technique manual when his eyes were sore. This was a very ordinary cultivation technique. Mountains could not collapse, but it could indeed quickly purify spiritual power. It was enough for him to cultivate to the peak of the pure spirit realm. Currently, the cultivation realms he knew were only the spirit gathering realm, the pure spirit realm, and the spirit transformation realm. There were definitely higher realms, but they were too far away. It was useless even if he knew. Next, he could not wait to start cultivating the mountain-shattering energy. This cultivation session lasted for 2 days. After cultivating the new cultivation technique, Ling Shiqi's cultivation was still at the 7th level of the spirit gathering realm, but the spiritual power in his body was much more condensed. He had also reached the peak of the 7th level. He estimated that he would be able to break through to the 8th level of the spirit gathering realm in a few days. Unfortunately, he had run out of food and water. He had to go out and collect some. There were not many edible things on Blood Fog Island. Most of them were wild fruits, roots, and leaves of plants. Those who had lived here for a while could recognize what was edible. There was even less water. Moreover, it was not only humans who needed water, but also monsters. Food could be gathered nearby, but water would be a risk. Ling Shiqi first called out the system and looked at his information. Name, Ling Shiqi, Lu Xingji. Cultivation level, 7th layer of the Spirit Gathering Realm. Cultivation method, Rank 1 Cultivation method. Mountain Shattering Force. Spiritual Technique, Great Perfection of Spiritual Technique. Triple Fold Water Palm, Perfection of Basic Sword Technique, a spiritual skill that is not ranked. System coins, -7. Ling Shiqi smiled with satisfaction. He was now much stronger than he was 2 days ago, and he had a spirit weapon in hand. As long as he was careful, he should not be in too much danger just by collecting some food and water. Then he picked up 2 animal skin bags and a small package. He held the fine iron sword tightly in his hand and carefully observed for a while before jumping out of the tree hole. There was only one water source nearby. It was a small pool with many wild fruits around it. It was a good place to go. The closer he got to the water source, the slower Leng Shiqi's speed became. When he cautiously approached the water source, he did not act rashly. Instead, he hid himself and calmly observed. The forest was dense, so there might be other people. Sure enough, not long after, there was a rustling sound not far away. There are people. Leng Shiqi was even more careful in hiding. After careful observation, he discovered that there were 3 people hiding behind a tree not far away. After a while, 2 people, one tall and one short, walked out. They were back to back, cautiously approaching the pool. As they walked, they took off the water bags on their waists. The 2 people took off several water bags and continuously filled them with water. At this moment, there was a sudden whistle. The 2 people who were fetching water looked at each other and knew that things were not good. There are demonic beasts. Let's go. The tall youth's expression tensed up. He did not care about the water bag he was holding and turned to run. The other person also followed closely behind in a panic. Demonic beasts were like a sharp sword hanging over everyone's head. Demonic beasts were all abnormally fierce and had thick skin. They were very dangerous. More importantly, fighting with demonic beasts would cause a lot of commotion, especially near the water source. There might be other people or demonic beasts. Once a fight started, it might attract more danger. If a spirit cultivator was attracted, they would only hide in the dark and wait for both sides to be injured before reaping the benefits. This kind of thing was not uncommon on Blood Mist Island. It's the Bonehorn Beast. Leng Shiqi, who was hiding in the dark, saw a demonic beast half the height of a person walking over. Its appearance was similar to a lizard, but there was a 3-inch long horn on its head. The horn was grayish-white and had a bony feel. This was the hardest part of the Bonehorn Beast's body and its most advantageous weapon. If one was stabbed by it, they would either die or be injured. It could be said that it was one of the more difficult ordinary demonic beasts to deal with. When the Bonehorn Beast saw someone, its eyes immediately turned red. It roared and rushed towards the 2 people. Leng Shiqi immediately held his breath and lowered his body. After the Bonehorn Beast chased for a while, he revealed his body and hurried to the pool. The Bonehorn Beast made such a big commotion that it attracted attention. Now was the best time to get water. He first filled the 2 water bags he brought, then picked up the water bags left behind by the 2 people and continued to fill them up. He filled a total of 4 bags. Ah! At this moment, a sharp scream came from not far away. Leng Shiqi's expression did not change. He knew that the 3 people must have already fought with the Bonehorn Beast and that someone was injured. At this moment, Leng Shiqi hesitated for a moment. Then, his eyes narrowed and a fierce look flashed across his eyes. He quietly moved over. Since there were already casualties, he had the opportunity to fish in troubled waters. The 3 people had a lot of supplies on them. When Leng Shiqi arrived near the battlefield, there was already a corpse lying on the ground. It was the short youth. There was a fist-sized bloody hole in his abdomen. Blood was flowing out as if it was free of charge. It seemed that the Bonehorn Beast had poked a hole in his abdomen. The one in charge of keeping watch was a small and thin youth. It was unknown what spirit technique he cultivated, but his movements were very agile. He relied on a few trees to firmly pin down the Bonehorn Beast. The tall youth's face was full of anger. He took the opportunity to jump onto the Bonehorn Beast's back. He punched out with both fists. His fists made a ka-ka sound. 8 echoes fist. His fists landed heavily. The Bonehorn Beast's horns were very tough, but the other parts of its body were very weak. The tall youth's punches had already split open the Bonehorn Beast's back. However, this was not fatal to the Bonehorn Beast. Instead, it stimulated its bestial nature. The bone-horn beast saw that it could not shake him off and actually slammed into a tree beside it. The bone-horn beast's movements were too fast for the tall youth to react. Boom! The thick and sturdy tree was broken in half by the impact. The bone-horn beast was not in a good state. The plants on Blood Fog Island were not ordinary. It was also injured from the collision. It seemed that its bones were broken. It lay on the ground motionless, but the red light in its eyes was even brighter. The tall youth was even more miserable. His entire upper body was badly mutilated. It was as if he was soaked in a pool of blood. He was exhaling more than he was inhaling. It seemed that he was about to die. Little Six, go, second brother. Ah! The skinny youth, who was Little Six, shouted angrily. He took out a dagger and quickly rushed to the bone-horn beast's side. He stabbed its head again and again. The bone-horn beast could not move. It could only roar and let him attack. He was also very smart. He specifically targeted the weakest parts of the beast. Soon, the bone-horn beast was dead. Huff huff. Little Six panted heavily and sat on the ground. His face was full of grief and anger. Seeing such a good opportunity, Ling Shichi was about to go out and pick up the leftovers when the sound of clapping rang out. Clap clap clap. Chapter 4. On the Blood Fog Island, killing demonic beasts was a huge loss. If they were in the outside world, the bone-horn beast's body would be valuable, especially the bone horn. It was definitely a good material for refining weapons. Unfortunately, this was the Blood Fog Island. Everyone here was a teenager. How could anyone know how to refine pills or refine weapons? Even if they did, they couldn't make bricks without straw. They had paid the price of 2 lives to kill a demonic beast, but they had gained nothing. Sigh. Little Six sighed. He knew that he couldn't stay here for long. He immediately took the resources from his second brother and fourth brother and was about to leave. Suddenly, something happened. Clap, clap, clap. What an emotional drama. At this moment, 3 people walked out of the forest. The leader smiled and clapped his hands with a mocking expression. Yen 9. Little Six's face darkened when he saw the newcomer. Yen 36, you're really something. When you return, you'll be the leader. Yen 9's lips curled into an evil smile. I don't know what you're talking about. Now that I'm in your hands, there's nothing to say. Since we know each other, all the resources here belong to you. Let me live. Little Six's face changed slightly. He took off his bag and water bag. Yen 9 shook his head and smiled. I couldn't tell. Yen 36, who only dared to hide behind me, has become like this. Actually, you discovered the bone-horn beast long ago. You only sent the signal when it approached the pool. Now that both of them are dead, you'll be the leader of the team when we return. Am I right? Yen 36's face changed. He opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but was ruthlessly interrupted by Yen 9. That's enough. When you die, all the resources will naturally be mine. Yen 9 waved his hand. The 2 people behind him immediately jumped out and pounced on Yen 36. Yen 9 looked around and finally, his gaze fell on a certain direction. Ling Shichi's heart sank. Yen 9 was looking in his direction. I've been discovered. Ling Shichi smiled bitterly in his heart. I didn't expect that 3 parties would come to collect water at the same time. This is too rare. The Blood Fog Island was neither too big nor too small. It was rare to encounter such a situation. Since he was discovered, Ling Shichi didn't bother to hide anymore. He clenched his fine iron sword and walked out confidently. He had heard of Yen Jiu before. Yen Jiu belonged to the strongest group in the area and was an expert who had already reached the 9th level of the spirit gathering realm. Being targeted by a spirit cultivator at the 9th level of the spirit gathering realm, there was no way to escape. Generally speaking, a small team would consist of about 5 to 10 people. The cultivation level of the team members was generally at the 5th or 6th level of the spirit-gathering realm, while the team leader was at the 7th or 8th level. As for those below the 5th layer, they could only fend for themselves. No team would take in those with weak cultivation. As for Yanjiao, he had 9 members in his team. The weakest among them was at the 7th level of spirit-gathering realm. Every single one of them was capable of forming a small team on their own. This kind of strength was enough to rank in the top 3 among the teams in this area. "Little brother, how should I address you?" Yanjiao came up and greeted him warmly. He gave people the feeling that he was a big brother next door. Ling Shiqi. Ling Shiqi didn't hide it. Everyone had their own code name engraved on their wrists. Anyone who looked closely would be able to see it. "Brother Lang, your sword looks pretty good. I wonder if you can lend it to me for a look." "Don't worry, you should have heard of me, Yanjiao. You should know that I don't force people to do things against their will," Yanjiao said with a smile. Ling Shiqi sneered in his heart, I'm afraid that those who see you force people against their will all die." He knew that Yanjiao had taken a fancy to his fine iron sword. This sword was given to him by the system. Although the name was very old-fashioned, the sword was slender and the blade emitted a cold aura. It was obvious that it wasn't an ordinary sword. On the Blood Fog Island, it was already good to have a normal weapon. Even Yanjiao coveted this kind of ranked spirit weapon. "There's no point in talking." Ling Shiqi shook his head. He couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with Yanjiao. He definitely wouldn't hand over the sword. In fact, whether he handed it over or not, they wouldn't let him go. Right now, he could only fight. Ling Shiqi made the first move. Yanjiao sneered in disdain, thinking that Ling Shiqi was overestimating himself. With a shake of his right hand, a short knife slid out of his sleeve. There were 2 or 3 cracks on the blade. No wonder he coveted Ling Shiqi's fine iron sword so much. Yanjiao didn't care about Ling Shiqi's sword at first because it didn't have any sword moves. He had 10 ways to dodge it. However, when he closed the distance, he realized that something was wrong. This sword was aimed at his vitals, but he didn't know which vitals it was aimed at. This sword seemed to have locked onto several vitals at the same time. It was as if it could change direction at any time. It was very difficult to predict. Strange. Yanjiao thought to himself. However, he knew that his cultivation was much higher than his opponent's, so he decided to attack. He poured all of his spiritual energy into the short knife, causing it to shine brightly. Chi! Yanjiao was stunned. He didn't expect that Ling Shiqi's sword had been slightly deflected, and the tip of the sword had pierced into his wrist. As the saying goes, an inch longer is an inch stronger. Yanjiao's short knife was already in front of Ling Shiqi. It was only a few inches away. However, those few inches were like the end of the world. Ling Shiqi changed from a stab to a flick and broke the tendons in Yanjiao's hand. Ah! Yanjiao screamed and dropped the short knife in his hand. The basic sword technique at the level of great perfection was so powerful. However, Yanjiao was at the 9th level of the spirit-gathering realm after all. He didn't care about his right hand anymore. He immediately formed a fist with his left hand. The fist was so fierce that it even caused a tiger's roar. Ling Shiqi's eyes flashed with a hint of madness. He didn't dodge and went straight for the attack. Threefold palm. At this moment, the threefold palm, at the level of great perfection, had been merged into one. The palm seemed simple and unadorned, but once it hit, the palm energy would be endless. 3 waves of spiritual energy would enter the enemy's body. Each wave was 3 times stronger than the previous one. The fist and the palm collided, producing a dull sound. Then, both of them retreated. Ling Shiqi retreated more than 10 steps. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. The force of Yanjiao's punch rushed into his body. However, he was prepared and hurriedly circulated his spiritual energy to counteract it. He still suffered some internal injuries. He only felt that his entire right arm was numb and his meridians were aching. He couldn't even hold the fine iron sword steadily. However, Yanjiu was even worse. At this moment, Yanjiu's entire left arm was twisted strangely. It was as if his bones were dislocated in several places. It was very miserable. Leng Shiqi's threefold palm, at the level of great perfection, turned the palm energy into 3 waves of hidden force that entered the opponent's body. It directly destroyed the insides of the body. Yanjiu didn't take Leng Shiqi's palms seriously because of his high cultivation level. He didn't even take any precautions. He allowed the 3 waves of hidden force to enter his left arm and wantonly destroy his meridians and bones. Now, his entire arm was crippled. Although it seemed like a long time, it had only been a dozen breaths since the two of them started fighting. Yanjiu, who was at the 9th level of spirit gathering, had actually lost both his arms. Take advantage of his weakness and kill him. Leng Shiqi obviously couldn't miss this opportunity. He endured the pain in his body and charged forward. As long as he killed Yanjiu, he was confident that he could escape from the other 2 who were only at the 7th level of spirit gathering. Save me! Yanjiu saw Leng Shiqi charging over and shouted loudly. Then, he actually turned around and ran toward the other 2. At this moment, the 2 people surrounding Yen 36 suddenly realized that in the blink of an eye, their boss had been defeated by someone at the 7th level of spirit gathering. Yanjiu, who was at the 9th level of spirit gathering, had been severely injured in just a few moves. Moreover, he had been defeated so miserably. The 2 of them immediately thought of something. They knew Yanjiu's strength very well. Seeing that he could easily defeat their leader, wouldn't they be courting death if they went over? However, if they didn't save him, their leader had treated them well. Moreover, if their leader escaped, how would they be able to withstand their leader's anger in the future? You go and help our leader. I'll take care of this person. The 2 of them hesitated for a moment before saying the same thing in unison. The atmosphere instantly became awkward. However, Leng Shiqi didn't care about this. While the 2 of them were hesitating, he chased after them. Gu Qiqi, Mo Wuxer, the 2 of you don't have to care about Yen 36. He took a punch from me and is severely injured. Block him for me. When we get back, I'll teach you the Howling Tiger Fist. Yanjiu saw that the 2 of them were actually hesitating and was really angry, hateful, and afraid. He was really afraid that the 2 of them would abandon him and leave, so he had to tempt them. Howling Tiger Fist. The 2 of them looked at each other and became excited. That was a level 1 spiritual technique. It was also Yanjiu's strongest spiritual technique. Its power was unparalleled. Who wouldn't want such a spiritual technique? The 2 of them immediately gave up on attacking Yen 36 and protected Yanjiu behind them. Scram! Leng Shiqi's eyes were filled with murderous intent. Yanjiu must die. Stone flipping palm. Oblique wind kick. The 2 of them attacked fiercely with a palm and a kick. Chapter 5. Leng Shiqi wasn't afraid of the 2's pincer attack. Instead, he took the initiative to attack. He used the threefold ripple palm and collided with Gu 27's flipping stone palm. He was very confident in his perfect stage threefold ripple palm. The 2 palms collided with a muffled sound. What? Ah! Immediately after, Gu 27 let out an incredulous scream. Gu 27's arm followed in Yen 9's footsteps. It was even worse. His entire arm was twisted into a fried dough twist. Leng Shiqi wouldn't be able to dodge Mo Wuxer's oblique wind kick. The kick tore through the air and arrived in front of him. There was no way he could dodge this kick. Bang! Mo Wuxer's kick landed on Leng Shiqi's waist. Even though he had already used his spirit energy to block it, he was still sent flying and rolled a few times on the ground. Yen 36. You're a smart man. What are you waiting for? Leng Shiqi managed to stabilize his body with great difficulty and shouted. On the other side, Yen 36, who was about to escape, trembled. He didn't know how many times he cursed Ling Shiqi in his heart. Although he had been besieged by 2 people before, he was good at speed. In just a few breaths of time, he had only suffered some minor injuries and consumed a lot of spiritual power. Now that they were attracted by Ling Shiqi, it was a good opportunity for him to escape. However, he hesitated. Just like Ling Shiqi said, he was a smart person. Since Yen 9 had decided to kill him, even if he escaped today, he would still be hunted down by Yen 9 in the future. If Yen 9 died here, his team would definitely fall into chaos. They might not be in the mood to hunt him down. If all 3 of them died here, they wouldn't know what happened today. Thinking of this, Yen 36 played with the dagger in his hand and fiercely stabbed at Gu 27, who was injured by Ling Shiqi. The situation of the battle suddenly changed. The strongest Yen 9's hands were crippled. Gu 27 and Yen 36 were fighting. The only one who was still in peak condition was Mo Wuxia. However, he was scared out of his wits by Ling Shiqi. What kind of demonic palm technique is that? Just a touch is enough to injure me. If it hits me a few times, I'll be dead. Therefore, even though he kicked Ling Shiqi, he was already thinking of retreating. Once he thought of retreating, his combat ability would weaken. Ling Shiqi stabbed out with his sword. He only used basic sword techniques, but within a few moves, he had left several sword wounds on his opponent's body. Yen 9 was shocked. Although Ling Shiqi's cultivation base was not high, his spiritual techniques were Shiqi's techniques. Were his techniques. Now that his hands were crippled, he basically had no fighting power left. It seemed that his 2 subordinates wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. SSSS. His hands is SSSS's S9's lens. T's S Shiqi, teat. Seeing that Yen Jiao had disappeared into the forest, Ling Shiqi panicked. Letting Yen Jiao escape today was like letting a tiger return to the mountain. The overall strength of Team 9 Wild Goose was not something he could fight head-on. More importantly, the main reason why Yen Jiao was able to severely injure him was that he had underestimated his opponent. Ling Shiqi had taken him by surprise. In the next head-on confrontation, Yen Jiao was prepared. As long as he fought Ling Shiqi and slowly depleted his spiritual energy, Ling Shiqi would definitely lose. Your master has abandoned you and left. Are you still here to die? Ling Shiqi said to Mo Wuxia, who was still dragging him. Ling Shiqi's back was facing Yen Jiao, so he didn't know that Yen Jiao had escaped. What? Mo Wuxia turned around. Indeed, 9 Yen was nowhere to be seen. Yen Jiao, you set me up. Mo Wuxia knew that he was finished the moment he turned around. He had actually made such a stupid mistake. Actually, Mo Wuxia should not have turned around regardless of whether 9th Yen had escaped or not. That was because once he turned around, he would have exposed a fatal flaw. Of course, Ling Shiqi would not let go of such a good opportunity. His triple-layered palm had already landed on Mo Wuxia's chest. Puff. Mo Wuxia opened his mouth and thick blood sprayed out. Some of it even splashed onto Ling Shiqi's body. Ling Shiqi could not care about this right now and immediately chased into the forest. However, after chasing for a few steps, Ling Shiqi stopped. It was not that he didn't want to chase, but he could already see Yen Jiao's shadow. He could only see the slightly swaying trees. This forest was too dense, and it would be too slow to follow the tracks. After all, Yen Jiao was at the 9th layer of the spirit transformation realm. He could not catch up. Ling Shiqi clenched his teeth and could only give up. He could only see if there would be another chance in the future. Since I can't catch up, I'll collect some interest. Ling Shiqi turned to look at Yen 36 and Gu 27 with a cold gaze. The 2 of them were still fighting. Gu 27's right arm was crippled. Even though his cultivation was 1 layer higher than Yen 36's, he could only bitterly defend. The blood marks on his body continued to increase, and it looked like he wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. Gu 27's heart was also collapsing. He had seen his captain escape, his brother get killed, and now Ling Shiqi walk over with his sword. He was also filled with despair. Soon, Gu 27 became a corpse, but Ling Shiqi's killing intent didn't decrease. Yen 36's body suddenly trembled. In the next instant, the cold sword was placed against his neck. Ling Shiqi, there is no enmity between us, and I even helped you stall someone. Everything here is yours, and I only want my own life. Yen 36 spoke with a fake smile. Ling Shiqi tilted his head slightly and looked at him with a smile. This caused Yen 36's heart to turn cold. These words sound familiar. I think you don't have much spirit force left after fighting so many battles. That movement technique of yours consumes a lot of spirit force. I wonder how many more times you can use it. The fine iron sword in Ling Shiqi's hand moved slightly and made a small cut on Yen 36's neck. Brother. Let's talk nicely, let's talk nicely. Yen 36 shouted. However, he could tell that Ling Shiqi didn't want to kill him, at least not now. To be honest, it doesn't matter if I kill you or not. After all, I already have enmity with Yen 9. However, it's the same for you. That's right, that's right. We are now in the same boat. Once Yen 9 recovers, he will definitely come after us. Why don't we work together? I have 3 people under me. Although their cultivation isn't high, they are still useful. I can even give you the enigmatic footwork. Yen 36 seemed to see hope for survival and quickly showed his worth. Enigmatic footwork? That movement technique of yours? Ling Shiqi's eyes lit up. At the same time, he thought to himself, he finally took the bait. He now had perfect basic sword techniques and 3-fold palms. However, basic sword techniques couldn't be considered spiritual techniques. 3-fold palms looked powerful at first glance, but once it was guarded against, it would be much less effective. However, if it could be paired with movement techniques, it would be completely different. That's right. As long as you don't kill me, I will teach you. That won't be necessary. Write down the spiritual technique. Ling Shiqi tore off a piece of clothing from Gu 27 and handed it over. Normally, if someone obtained a spiritual technique, they would destroy it after learning it. If there was a special reason to pass it down to someone else, they could only pass it down orally or write it down. Yen 36's face darkened. Ling Shiqi, if I give you the spiritual technique, will you really let me go? You better understand that you are in no position to negotiate. If you don't hand over the spiritual technique, you will die. If you hand it over, you might not die. You choose. Of course, you can also try to escape. Ling Shiqi said coldly and pressed his sword down a little more. Chapter 6. Yen 36, who had a sword on his neck, was filled with hatred. But now, he was a fish on the chopping block, he could only gamble. He gambled that Ling Shiqi would not kill him. Yen 36 then used Bone 27's blood to write the enigmatic footwork technique on a rag. I've given you the technique, I hope you will keep your promise. But, the answer he got was a sword. Ling Shiqi's sword pierced down, leaving a deep bloody hole in Yen 36's shoulder. Ah! You! Yen 36 grimaced in pain and shouted, Ling Shiqi, what is the meaning of this? I thought you were a smart person, but I didn't expect you to be so foolish as to tamper with the technique. This is just a warning. You're lying. Yen 36's words were tough, but he thought to himself, how is that possible? 90% of what I wrote is true, I only changed a few words, how would he know? Is he trying to trick me? I'll give you one last chance, you need to know that we don't have much time left. With such a big commotion and so much blood flowing, it was hard to say when spirit cultivator or demonic beasts would be attracted. When that time comes, I'll have to kill you first before leaving. Yen 36 heard this and struggled in his heart, but in the end, he chose to compromise. He did not dare to gamble with his life anymore, he could not see through the person in front of him. Here. Yen 36 wrote a new one and handed it over. At this time, a line of words appeared in front of Ling Shiqi. Discovered rank 1 technique, enigmatic footwork technique, learn, consume 1 skill point. Ling Shiqi smiled, you're smart. Then, Puqi. You. Yen 36 was about to say something, but Ling Shiqi's sword had already slit his throat. Yen 36 was a person who could betray his own team, so naturally, he could also betray Ling Shiqi in the blink of an eye. He could not be allowed to live. Ling Shiqi coldly sheathed his sword and quickly picked up Yen 36's dagger. He ripped off the bags and water bags from the other people's bodies. He looked around and left the place. Not long after, 2 teams of people came here one after another. Seeing that there was nothing good to take, they left after a brief exchange. As for who died, why did they die here, and who did it? No one would care. Back in the tree hole, Ling Shiqi could finally relax. At the same time, a strong sense of exhaustion hit him. Although his journey had been relatively smooth and he had killed a lot of people, he had been in a tense state ever since he got close to the water source. He had also been injured in the battle with Yen Jiu and the others. He had also used up a lot of his spiritual energy. Naturally, he was not feeling well. Fortunately, the harvest from this trip was still very sufficient. The food and water they collected was enough to last them for 10 days if they used it sparingly. The most important thing was the enigmatic footwork. Ling Shiqi took out the rag. A notification appeared in front of his eyes again. This time, he chose yes. Immediately after, Ling Shiqi's consciousness returned to the familiar gray space. In the blink of an eye, he had already mastered the enigmatic footwork. Beginner, expert, small success, large success, and great perfection of the enigmatic footwork. Now, Ling Shiqi felt that even without using spiritual energy, his legs had become lighter. At the same time, he also knew that the enigmatic footwork was a spiritual technique that allowed one to move within a small area. The instantaneous burst of speed was very fast and did not follow the rules. It seemed to be disorganized and the opponent would not be able to predict where the attack would come from. It was very easy to fall into a passive state. A very good spiritual technique. Now, even if I face Yen Jiu head-on, I have a good chance of winning. Ling Shiqi nodded in satisfaction. Then, Ling Shiqi began to cultivate. He wanted to break through to Spirit Gathering Stage 8 before the next fight for cultivation resources. 12 days later, Ling Shiqi left the tree hole and walked towards the center of Blood Mist Island. At this moment, his information in the system had become, name, Ling Shiqi, Lu Xingji, cultivation level, Spirit Gathering Stage 8 technique, rank 1 technique Mountain Crushing Force spiritual technique, unranked spiritual technique Triple Water Ripple Palm mastery unranked spiritual technique Basic Sword technique mastery rank 1 spiritual technique Enigmatic footwork mastery calculating the time. Today should be the day when the Blood Red Tower would erupt with cultivation. Resources. Based on his previous experience, he needed to find a vantage point so that it would be easier to determine where the resources would land. Ling Shiqi looked around. He climbed up the tallest tree nearby and looked into the distance. Sure enough, not long after, there was the sound of something breaking through the air. Colorful resources shot in all directions. The resources closest to him were shining with white light. The white light contained cultivation resources that could increase one's spiritual energy, such as pills and spiritual stones. Okay. Ling Shiqi knew that his spiritual techniques were basically enough. He also had cultivation methods and weapons. What he lacked the most was real spiritual energy cultivation. Without wasting any time, he immediately jumped down and rushed towards the white box. When Ling Shiqi arrived, there were already people fighting. At this moment, there were 3 teenagers surrounding a girl. No, it should be said that there were originally 4 people, but now one of them had fallen to the ground forever. The 4 people who were fighting saw Ling Shiqi. It was not that he did not want to hide first, but this place was a wasteland. There was no place to hide. Brother, this girl is in the pure spirit realm. Let's kill her first. We'll split the resources equally. One of them immediately shouted. Girl? Pure spirit realm. Ling Shiqi was shocked. First of all, girls were rare on Blood Mist Island. There were very few female spirit cultivators, and the number of girls caught on Blood Mist Island was far less than the number of boys. There were only 2 kinds of girls on Blood Mist Island. The first kind died early. Most of the girls were timid and weak, especially the girls in their teens. They were at the age where they were pampered at home. However, this place was not like the outside world, where there were people who would show mercy to the fairer sex. Some even died in the hands of the people around them. The second kind was a strong woman who acted alone. This kind of girl was very rare. They did not rely on anyone, only on themselves. But to be able to survive like this meant that none of them were easy to provoke. Just like the girl in front of him, her face was covered in blood and her facial features could not be seen clearly. Her figure was smaller than the others. However, her cultivation had already stepped into the pure spirit realm. The spirit gathering realm was considered the entry level of the spirit cultivation system and was the most basic. It could even be said that people in this realm could not be considered a true spirit cultivator. This was because what one had to do in this realm was to sense the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and draw it into the body. However, the spiritual energy that was drawn into the body was only in an aimless state and could not be mobilized freely and smoothly. And the pure spirit realm was an existence that had already opened up the Qi Sea. The spiritual energy of a spirit cultivator in the pure spirit realm was all stored in the Qi Sea. Not only could it be mobilized at will, the density and storage of spiritual energy far exceeded that of the spirit gathering realm. It could be said that stepping into the pure spirit realm was truly stepping into the world of spirit cultivators. And the girl in front of him was actually far ahead in all kinds of unfavorable circumstances and was the first to break through to the pure spirit realm. It could be seen how terrifying her cultivation talent was. The 3 people surrounding her were at the 9th, 7th, and 6th level of the spirit gathering realm. It was already not bad for such strength to be able to hold on until now. In fact, only the 9th level of the spirit gathering realm with a steel blade could fight head-on. The other 2 only dared to probe around. They were about to be unable to hold on when they saw Ling Shiqi coming over. His cultivation was not weak and he even had a good weapon. He was definitely a powerful helper. The words just now were shouted by the 9th level of the spirit gathering realm. Ling Shiqi nodded his head when he heard that. The fine iron sword in his hand drew a sword flower and rushed over. Chapter 7. Seeing Ling Shiqi coming over with his sword, the 3 of them were overjoyed. However, the next moment, they were stunned. This was because Ling Shiqi had suddenly appeared beside the person with the weakest cultivation base in a flash like a ghost. When that person realized, the iron sword had already pierced his heart. You? Are you crazy? We can only win if we work together. You're just sending yourself to death if you help her. The leader's expression changed. He was shocked and angry. Ling Shiqi sighed softly, not because of anything else, but because he felt that it was a pity. This time, he only managed to kill the weakest one. It was a pity that the level 7 spirit gathering cultivator was too far away. He did not have the confidence to kill the level 9 cultivator. I haven't seen you for a while. You've grown quite a bit. The girl stared at Ling Shiqi and said calmly. When the leader heard this, he was so scared that his hair stood on end. So the 2 of them know each other, and they seem to be quite close. It's over. He only had one thought now, and that was, run. However, the girl immediately saw through his intentions. She moved her feet and stuck close to him. She formed a claw and her fingers turned gray. Her 10 fingernails grew to an inch long, looking like a ghost's claw. Delta Origi slashed with her fingers and tore off a large piece of flesh from the man's back. Ah! The man screamed but did not stop. The girl's eyes flashed with anger. She swung her arm and a black whip suddenly came out from her sleeve. The man heard the sound but did not dare to stop. He could only roll on the ground but was still hit by the whip on his right leg. The girl then took a few steps forward and closed in on him. After a few moves, she grabbed his throat and crushed it. Her attack was swift and ruthless. She had been hiding her strength all this time. At the same time, Ling Shiqi found another level 7 spirit gathering cultivator. This person held a long staff and felt that his chances of escaping were slim. He could only fight with his life on the line. The long staff in his hand danced with vigor, but Ling Shiqi used the confusion footwork, first appearing to his left, then flashing to his right. The man's expression became more and more flustered. An opening. Ling Shiqi caught an opening and used both his palms and sword to finish him off in a few moves. In terms of cultivation, he was only one level higher than his opponent. However, with 3 perfection spiritual skills, his combat power was much higher than his opponent's. At this time, Ling Shiqi and Delta Origi's eyes flashed with a trace of shock. Obviously, they did not expect the other party to kill their opponent so quickly. Then, both of them looked at the glowing box on the ground at the same time. Ling Shiqi knew quite a bit about this girl called Delta Origi. When they first entered Blood Mist Island, Ling Shiqi had taken care of her a few times. At that time, Delta Origi was completely different from now. She was an innocent little girl who did not know much about the world. Ling Shiqi's heart softened when he remembered how she had curled up into a ball and trembled in fear. He had helped her a few times and even brought her into a small team. Delta Origi was very lucky. Not long after entering Blood Mist Island, she had picked up a cultivation technique. From then on, her cultivation talent could only be described as terrifying. She had cultivated to level 5 of spirit gathering in a very short time, far surpassing the team leader at that time. However, because of this, she was not respected by the others. Instead, she was ostracized. They were afraid that she would steal the team leader's position after becoming strong, so they forced Delta Origi to hand over the cultivation technique. However, even Ling Shiqi did not expect Delta Origi to do this. That was, kill. At that time, no one expected Delta Origi to suddenly go on a rampage and kill people. The team leader was simply stunned and was killed in a few moves. Ling Shiqi hesitated for a moment and also stood on Delta Origi's side. The two of them joined forces and killed the other 4 people. Later, Delta Origi took the initiative to leave. Ling Shiqi did not say anything. He was just a little worried about the changes in Delta Origi. Because she usually appeared to be very quiet and a little timid. He did not know when she had completely changed. Perhaps this was the change that had to be done on Blood Mist Island. The two of them had occasionally met a few times before and even joined forces. They could be considered to have some tacit understanding. This time, Ling Shiqi did not expect that Delta Origi had broken through to the pure spirit realm. After coming to Blood Mist Island for nearly a year, this was the first time he had seen an existence of the pure spirit realm. Delta Origi put away her whip, patted her sleeves, and said indifferently, "There should be spirit stones and medicinal pills in the box. Let's divide them equally." "All right." Ling Shiqi shrugged slightly, picked up the box, and opened it directly. There were 5 fist-sized, irregular stones inside. However, these 5 stones were faintly emitting a sparkling and translucent light. "It's spirit stones." Ling Shiqi was overjoyed. "I'll take 3, you take 2. Hearing this, Ling Shiqi handed over 3 of the spirit stones. He was already very satisfied with getting 2. Delta Origi casually took them and stuffed them into her arms. However, in the next moment, she suddenly slapped out with her palm without any warning. Her target was Ling Shiqi's head. Ling Shiqi was startled by Delta Origi's sudden attack, but he did not panic. His figure moved and dodged, but the fierce wind from the palm still blew him back 2 steps. A pure spirit realm expert is actually so strong? Ling Shiqi was secretly shocked. Delta Origi's first move did not work, so she made another move. Her hands turned gray and continued to attack. Ling Shiqi's expression froze. He did not dare to take it head-on, and could only rely on his confusion footwork to dodge again. At this time, he also discovered that although Delta Origi's attacks were fierce, she still left some leeway every time. The key was that she did not reveal any killing intent, which meant that she was testing him. As a result, Ling Shiqi's fighting spirit was aroused. Having a pure spirit realm expert as a sparring partner was something he could not wish for. He was not satisfied with just defending. While dodging, he stabbed out with his fine iron sword from a tricky angle. Delta Origi frowned. That sword was a little beyond her expectations, but that was it. She waved her arm, and the long whip spiraled out, tightly entangling the fine iron sword. Then, she pulled hard. Ling Shiqi was careless and was pulled forward a few steps. At the same time, Delta Origi raised her other hand, and her palm turned gray. Ling Shiqi saw that he could not dodge, so he made up his mind and also hit out with his palm. Bang! When the two palms collided, Ling Shiqi felt as if his palm had hit a hard stone, and his whole arm was numb from the shock. Then, a strong force rushed over. He hurriedly used all his spiritual power to resist, but he was still sent flying. The fine iron sword also flew out of his hand. Ling Shiqi's spiritual power circulated in his body, and he finally relieved some of the force and landed on the ground. His face tightened, and his right hand touched his calf. There was a dagger tied to it. Delta Origi's small mouth was slightly open, and she was even more surprised. Her ghost jade claw was successful, and when it turned into a ghost claw, it was enough to cut gold and break stone, but now there were several cracks. In addition, there were 3 strands of spiritual power that forced into her body. If it was not for her rich spiritual power that resolved it in time, she would have been injured. Pure spirit realm is not something I can compete with right now. Ling Shiqi thought, and at the same time, he was determined to break through as soon as possible. Delta Origi did not attack again at this time. She flipped her hand, and the fine iron sword spun a few times in the air, and finally stabbed in front of Ling Shiqi. How about a deal? A deal? I see that you use the sword well, but unfortunately, you don't have a sword technique. I will use a rank 1 sword technique to exchange for your movement technique, how about it? Delta Origi slowly put away her whip and said leisurely. Oh. Ling Shiqi pulled out the fine iron sword in front of him. Hearing this, his heart moved. Even if his basic sword technique was perfect, it was only a basic sword technique, and there were no sword moves. If he could get his hands on a sword technique, his strength would definitely rise to another level. But the confusing footwork was too important. He used the confusing footwork to be able to exchange a few moves with Delta Origi, who was in the pure spirit realm. Otherwise, he would have been seriously injured. Ling Shiqi muttered. Chapter 8. Ling Shiqi hesitated for a moment before nodding his head in agreement. He had no choice but to agree. The girl in front of him was becoming more and more unfathomable. Although the two of them had some feelings for each other, if he really did not agree, she might just directly attack him. Delta Origi had a sword technique but no sword, so wouldn't it be easier to just snatch it? In the end, strength was the most important thing. Alright, let's go somewhere else. Delta Origi saw this and smiled lightly. Even with her unkempt hair and dirty face, she was still breathtaking. Ling Shiqi did not care about this. Instead, he looked around and saw a few faint figures appear in the distance. He skillfully picked up the steel sword, long staff, and a few water bags. Delta Origi did not even look at them, obviously not interested. Immediately, the two of them turned and ran towards the forest on the side. Not long after, the two of them each took a piece of tree bark that was engraved with words and handed it to each other. A system notification appeared in front of Ling Shiqi's eyes. Discovered rank 1 spiritual technique Willow Sword Style. Do you want to learn it? 1 skill point. No. The appearance of the system notification meant that the spiritual technique was real. Of course, he would not hand over a fake enigmatic footwork. Both of them were very satisfied with this transaction. Just as Ling Shiqi was about to leave, Delta Orgi rolled her eyes and said, "Ling Shiqi, how about we make another deal?" Ling Shiqi was really confused this time. "If you can break through to the 9th level of the spirit gathering realm within a month, then help me do something. If you succeed, the benefits will be beyond your imagination." Delta Origi's tone became serious. For a moment, several thoughts flashed through Ling Shiqi's mind, but he still could not figure out what Delta Origi was up to. In short, it was definitely something very dangerous. Something that even she, a pure spirit stage cultivator, could not solve alone. So she suddenly attacked just now to test my strength. It seems like I'm still not strong enough. The exchange of sword techniques is to improve my strength. Ling Shiqi thought to himself. After thinking for a while, Ling Shiqi replied, "Okay, I promise you." Seeing that Ling Shiqi agreed so quickly, Delta Origi hesitated. "Don't you want to think about it?" Ling Shiqi shook his head. "As you said, if we succeed, we will gain great benefits. Currently, I have the confidence to break through to the 9th layer within a month, but if I continue to cultivate like this, I don't know when I will be able to reach the pure spirit realm. This is an opportunity. I don't want to miss it. Alright, find me at the barren land in a month's time." The Delta Origi turned around and left. Ling Shiqi pondered for a moment, then tightened the small pile of things on his body and walked towards the tree hole. When Ling Shiqi returned to the vicinity of the tree hole, his footsteps suddenly stopped, and then he quietly climbed up a big tree beside him, using the dense branches and leaves to cover his body. This was because there was a faint voice coming from not too far away. It's around here. Really, I'm not lying." A thin and weak young man said to the 3 people beside him with a flustered expression. "Stop talking nonsense. I only care about the results. If you can find him, you live. If you can't, you die for him." One of the tall young men, who was holding a giant axe, roared fiercely, scaring him to the point that his whole body began to tremble. "Hen 19, lower your voice. This place is too dense. It's already dark and covered by fog. It's normal that you can't find him for a while. Don't let Ling Shiqi hear you. Hide first, don't worry." Another young man wearing a black robe said in a low voice. On Blood Fog Island, everyone was only wearing a set of clothes when they were thrown in, but after many battles, most of the survivors were not wearing clothes. Basically, they were simply wrapped in tree bark, leaves, or animal skin. But this young man actually had a complete set of clothes, which was very rare. "Hua 43, you make it sound nice. I don't want to be in a hurry. But boss said that whoever can kill Ling Shiqi first will get the Howling Tiger Fist. That's a level 1 spiritual technique. We're not the only group looking for him, so we have to be in a hurry. Alright, we're lucky to have caught a former teammate of Ling Shiqi. Coincidentally, he knows that Ling Shiqi often appears here. We're already ahead of the other group." "Shut up." The last person spoke. His voice sounded a little hoarse. Hen 19 and Hua 43 immediately shut up as soon as he spoke. It seemed that they were quite afraid of this person. Ling Shiqi hid in the dark. He vaguely heard a few words and knew that these people were looking for him. One of them was a familiar voice. It was one of the former members of his team, 212, who was at level 6 of the spirit gathering realm. Gradually, the 4 people got closer and closer. Ling Shiqi sensed their spiritual energy and found that the 3 of them were at level 8 of the spirit gathering realm. Something's not right. Yan Jiu knows my strength. He's underestimating me by sending 3 people at level 8 of the spirit gathering realm to kill me. No, he's already underestimated me once and paid a heavy price for it. He won't make the same mistake again. Then, he must think that these 3 people are strong enough to kill me. Or, there might be other people lying in ambush nearby. Ling Shiqi was a little confused. After careful consideration, he decided not to make a move. He quietly took out the tree bark and a system notification appeared in front of his eyes. Discovered level 1 spiritual technique, Willow Sword Style. Do you want to learn it? One skill point. Yes. Then, his consciousness was dragged into the gray space. However, Ling Shiqi did not realize that when he took out the tree bark, he accidentally touched the steel sword and long rod tied to his back. There was a slight sound of metal colliding. The sound was very, very soft. Even he himself did not notice it. However, the young man with the hoarse voice suddenly raised his head and said anxiously, "There's someone there." Before he finished his sentence, he rushed over. Hen 19 and Hua 43 reacted immediately and followed closely behind. When Tu Shiqi saw this, he hesitated. Then, he made up his mind and turned to run. When Ling Shiqi's consciousness returned to his body, in his eyes, the four people were still the same. Only the young man with the hoarse voice seemed to have turned his head. He did not pay much attention to it. He continued to level up and entered the gray space to practice willow sword style again. After a few breaths, Ling Shiqi's eyes lit up. Then, he squinted his eyes. At this moment, he saw that the four people were looking at him and running over. He knew that he had been exposed. Without any explanation, Ling Shiqi jumped down from the tree and fled. At the same time, 212 also turned around and fled. The two of them ran in opposite directions. The other three people hesitated. The person who was discovered just now was most likely the Ling Shiqi they were looking for. If he was, then it would be fine. Tu Shiqi ran away. But if he was not, and Tu Shiqi ran away, then they would be in a stalemate. What should they do? Hua 43, you are the fastest. Go and catch that guy. Hen 19 and I will go after the other one. If he is Ling Shiqi, don't bother about Tu Shiqi. Come back as soon as possible. Ling Shiqi's palm technique is very powerful. Hen 19 and I might not be able to take him down. Wait for my signal. The young man with the hoarse voice said as he ran. Hua 43 nodded and went after Tu Shiqi. On the other side, when Ling Shiqi jumped down from the tree, the weapons on his body made ding ding dang dang sounds. He finally realized what the problem was. He immediately wanted to throw away the steel sword and long stick. Wearing these things would only affect his fighting ability. But he was a little reluctant. Suddenly, Ling Shiqi had an idea. He held the two weapons in his hands and called out the system. Chapter 9. After Ling Shiqi called out the system, a few lines of words appeared in front of his eyes. Worth 9 system coins. Would you like to sell? Worth 10 system coins. Would you like to sell? Yes. Sale successful. You have a total of 12 system coins. In the blink of an eye, the steel sword and long staff in Ling Shiqi's hands suddenly disappeared. The corners of Ling Shiqi's mouth curled up slightly. As he ran, he turned his head and glanced behind him. When he saw that there were only two people chasing after him, a murderous look appeared in his eyes. Swish swish. Ling Shiqi went through a thick patch of unknown vegetation and hid behind a large tree. His left hand formed a palm, and a spiritual light flashed in his palm. His right hand held the sword in a slightly strange position. It was the starting position of the brushing willow sword style. The brushing willow sword style was a level 1 sword technique. There were 5 sword styles, and they were mainly graceful and agile. The first 4 styles did not have a name. The last one, which was also the strongest, was called the brushing willow. One had to cultivate the brushing willow sword style to the proficient realm to barely master this sword technique. Ling Shiqi had just mastered this sword technique in a short period of time. Now was the time to kill someone and use it as a sacrifice. When Hen 19 was about to go through the patch of vegetation, he was pulled back by the hoarse young man. What's wrong with you? Hen 19 was eager to succeed. He was about to catch up when he was suddenly pulled back. However, he suddenly remembered that he could not afford to offend this person in front of him. He quickly collected his emotions and reorganized his words. The hoarse young man did not care about Hen 19's attitude. His expression was serious as he said, "Be careful of the ambush." "Is there a need for that? Why should we be afraid of him? Even if his palm technique is powerful, I don't believe that he would dare to fight with my big axe." Hee hee. Hen 19 tapped the axe in his hand with confidence. The hoarse young man said, "Okay, you go first." Although Hen 19 said so, he didn't dare to be careless at this time. He held his giant axe in front of him and rushed forward. Hen 19 quickly looked around and found that there was no one around. He relaxed a little. At this moment, a figure suddenly rushed over from the side. "It's really you, Ling Shiqi." Hen 19 quickly turned around and saw that the person was just as Captain Yen 9 had described. He was both surprised and happy. He was happy that he had finally found Ling Shiqi. As long as he killed him, he would be able to obtain the tiger roaring fist technique. He was shocked because he didn't think that he would really dare to launch a sneak attack here, and at such a fast speed. By the time he reacted, Ling Shiqi's palm was already in front of him. Hen 19 saw that he couldn't dodge the attack, so he decided to face it head-on. He decided to use offense as defense. The giant axe in his hands suddenly lit up, and he swung it down heavily. He did not believe that Ling Shiqi would dare to take it head-on. Sure enough, Ling Shiqi took a sidestep and walked over. Hen 19 sneered in his heart. He was about to fall into his rhythm. All he had to do was wait for his teammates to join up and kill him. Then, he would be able to obtain the Howling Tiger Fist. However, he didn't expect the Ling Shiqi in front of him to disappear in the blink of an eye. Hen 19's whole body trembled. His brain wasn't slow either. He roared and spun around with his giant axe. Sure enough, he saw that Ling Shiqi had already run behind him. The palm flashing with light was about to hit him. That was close. Hen 19, who had forced back Ling Shiqi again, was shocked and broke out in a cold sweat. However, at this moment, Ling Shiqi disappeared again. Not good. Hen 19 had just used all his strength to turn around. His body and spiritual energy were both in a stiff state. It was impossible for him to go back to his previous state. There's still a chance. His palm is still a short distance away from me. With that thought in mind, Hen 19 was planning to dodge the attack and stall for time until his teammates arrived. However, what he didn't expect was that something cold and sharp pierced his body, and it was the back of his heart. Cough. Wah. Hen 19 spat out a large mouthful of blood. He looked at his heart in disbelief. There was a small sword tip there. It was covered in his own blood. His consciousness began to blur. He remembered the tragic state of his captain's arms and the advice of the horse youth. However, it was all too late. Just as his consciousness was about to disappear, he seemed to hear a sentence. Ling Shiqi, die. It's Blood 36. He will definitely avenge me. From Ling Shiqi's sneak attack to Hen 19's death, less than 10 seconds had passed. When Blood 36 heard Hen 19's voice, he knew he had found Ling Shiqi. However, the first thing he did wasn't to help. Instead, he whistled. This was their team's secret signal. It meant to gather. He wanted to call Flower 4-3 back first. Unfortunately, he didn't expect Ling Shiqi's strength. The Ling Shiqi today was completely different from the Ling Shiqi 10 days ago. When Blood 36 arrived, he was greeted by the sight of Ling Shiqi's sword piercing Hen 19's heart. It was rare for Blood 36 to lose his mind. This was because Hen 19 was a careless and straightforward person. Blood 36 didn't normally treat him well, but he didn't have to be so calculative when he was with Hen 19. He treated Hen 19 as a true teammate. But now, Hen 19 was dead. Blood 36 threw a punch. The sound of a tiger's roar could be heard as it tore through the air. It was none other than the Howling Tiger Fist. Ling Shiqi knew that there were two people chasing after him, so he was already on guard against the other person. He wasn't flustered at all. He drew his sword and retreated before using his bewildering movement technique. Bang! Blood 36's punch was extremely powerful. He couldn't withdraw his fist, and it landed on the tree behind him, causing the tree to shake violently. Countless leaves immediately fell from the tree. Most of them landed on Henanatine's body, as if they were setting up a shelter for him. Ling Shiqi had many types of perfected spirit techniques. A hint of confusion flashed through his eyes as he thought to himself, this person's howling tiger fist seems to be much more advanced than Yanzhou's. That's strange. But even if it was strange, he wouldn't let go of this good opportunity when his opponent was out of strength. With a shake of his fine iron sword, he elegantly swung it through the air, aiming straight for his opponent's back. At this moment, Blood 36 finally regained his senses. He was cursing himself for being too impulsive. However, this might be an opportunity for him. Blood 36 silently placed a hand on his waist. Only after Ling Shiqi closed the distance between them did Blood 36 turn around. His eyes were filled with panic, as if he had been scared out of his wits. Ling Shiqi vaguely felt that something was amiss. Disregarding everything else, a person who was able to cultivate to the 8th level of the spirit-gathering realm and had at least achieved the initial success in the Howling Tiger Fist should not be scared out of his wits. Sure enough, at this moment, 2 extremely thin silver needles shot toward Ling Shiqi's heart and head. Hidden weapons? Ling Shiqi was shocked and hurriedly used the chaotic steps. However, strangely enough, Ling Shiqi's heart tightened as an indescribable sense of danger welled up in him. Immediately after, he felt a sharp pain in his left shoulder. He looked down and saw a silver needle stuck in his shoulder. More than half of it had gone in. Ling Shiqi immediately felt his entire shoulder and left arm go numb. He couldn't control them anymore. Furthermore, the numbness was gradually spreading toward his heart. He looked at Blood 36 in shock. Blood 36 was no longer as panicked as before. Instead, his expression was as gloomy as water, and his eyes were filled with ferocity. When did this needle come out? And how did he predict my position? Ling Shiqi was in disbelief. Blood 36 naturally wouldn't give him an explanation. He raised his fist and prepared for the Howling Tiger Fist. Chapter 10. Blood 36's punch didn't seem to be as powerful as last time, but it gave off a more dangerous feeling, as if all of the power that had been leaking out had been condensed. Even Blood 36 himself didn't think that his roaring tiger fist would reach the level of complete mastery under such circumstances. Ling Shiqi didn't think that he would encounter an opponent like this, and his ego had been completely crushed. This was a perfect example of the saying, "There's always someone better than you." In the past, there was Delta Origi, who had terrifying cultivation aptitude, and now there was Blood 36, who had superb combat awareness and techniques. Even though he had the system, he could still lose his life if he wasn't careful. Ling Shiqi forcibly repressed the shock in his heart, and not only did he not want to retreat, his ferocity was even more aroused. The more dangerous the situation was, the more clear-headed Ling Shiqi became. At this moment, he was like an extremely calm and ferocious beast. Ling Shiqi raised his sword with his right hand and circulated his spiritual power, causing the sword to flash with spiritual light. He used the wind-blowing willow sword style that he had just mastered. The fine iron sword suddenly became ethereal, like a leaf swaying in the wind. The sword technique appeared to be very soft, but Blood 36 didn't dare to be careless in the slightest. He knew that Ling Shiqi's forte should be his palm techniques, but he was abandoning his palm for a sword, so there had to be something fishy going on. He immediately focused 120%, and his roaring tiger fist became slightly more powerful. The sword and the fist were rapidly approaching each other. At this moment, an inexplicable light flashed in Ling Shiqi's mind, and an inconceivable thought appeared. This was a very crazy thought, and perhaps he couldn't do it, but if he could, then his opponent would be dead for sure. A hint of astonishing madness suddenly appeared in Ling Shiqi's eyes, and he instantly entered an indescribable state. Just as the two of them were about to clash, Ling Shiqi's body suddenly disappeared. Immediately afterward, he appeared directly behind Blood 36, maintaining his original posture, but the tip of his sword was pointed in the opposite direction. Blood 36's body was still charging forward, and as he walked, he began to stumble. His arms and head were separated from his body at the same time, causing blood to splatter everywhere. PFFF. Leng Shiqi also spat out a mouthful of blood. He had suffered internal injuries. Just a moment ago, when Leng Shiqi used Wind Blow's Willow, he used his fastest speed to use the bewildering footwork 3 times. He had cut off Blood 36's arms and head at the same time. However, this was generally impossible. One must know that during the spirit gathering stage, the spiritual energy in one's body was unstable and it was not easy to mobilize it. When using a spirit technique, almost all of the spirit chi in the form of the body would be transferred to a certain part, such as the hands and feet, or be transported to a weapon. However, Leng Shiqi had just used 2 spiritual techniques at the same time, as well as a spiritual artifact. SS spirit footwork even be a pure spirit cultivator. Is the reason why Leng Shiqi could do it was because his enigmatic footwork technique and basic sword technique were at the great perfection stage. In this stage, his understanding of the enigmatic footwork technique had reached the peak, and he knew how to use the least amount of spirit chi to achieve the best effect. Although the enigmatic footwork technique was not at the great perfection stage, the advantage of a great perfection stage basic sword technique was apparent. Basic sword techniques were used to build a foundation for sword practice, and the importance of the foundation was self-evident. It was precisely because of this strong foundation that he could maintain the enigmatic footwork technique in different directions. Of course, Leng Shiqi's footwork technique was not without a price. He had just forcefully reversed his spirit chi to achieve this. This also caused his meridians to be damaged, causing him to suffer internal injuries, and almost all of the spirit chi in his body was exhausted. Leng Shiqi could not help but gasp for breath. He looked around vigilantly, pulled out the silver needles from his body, and hid behind a tree. He knew that there was another person on the other side. In his current state, any spirit cultivator could kill him, let alone someone at the 8th level of the spirit gathering realm. Naturally, Leng Shiqi could not just sit there and wait for death. He took out a small bag from his pocket, opened it, and poured a small amount of powder into his mouth. It was the spirit recovery powder given by the system. Feeling the spirit chi in his body recovering, Leng Shiqi's eyes were filled with murderous intent. He must kill Yan Jiu's men. Just as Leng Shiqi hid for the time it took to drink a cup of tea, footsteps gradually sounded in the distance. Hua 43 was a little depressed. He was in charge of chasing after 212, and it did not take long for him to catch up, but he did not expect that the kid would dare to resist. The problem was that Hua 43 had to catch him alive, so he could not kill him. Thus, the two of them began to fight. When he heard Blood 36's signal, he knew that he had found Leng Shiqi, so there was no need to keep 212 alive. Killing intent rose in his heart, and he killed 212, but because of this, he wasted some time. He was depressed not because of anything else, but because he was afraid that Leng Shiqi would be killed by the other 2 first. He did not want to take the credit in front of the captain and leave him clean. However, when he arrived at the scene, he saw Blood 36's miserable state. There was another corpse buried by leaves, but when he saw the giant axe, he knew whose corpse it was. Hua 43's mind exploded. His eyes were filled with disbelief, and a layer of cold sweat appeared on his back. Even his breathing had become heavy. Impossible, this is impossible. Leng Shiqi? How could a 7th level spirit gathering realm cultivator kill Hatred 19 and Blood 36 so quickly? That was Blood 36, someone that even the captain was afraid of. Could it be that Leng Shiqi has helpers? Then. Hua 43 whispered in disbelief. Suddenly, he seemed to have realized something. Almost at the same time, an extremely dangerous feeling spread throughout his body. Oh no, I was too careless. Hua 43 regretted it, but it was too late. He could only instinctively move to the side. In the next instant, a sharp sword pierced through his right shoulder. Then, when his body leaned forward, he was hit in the back. 3 waves of spiritual energy entered his body, wantonly destroying his internal organs and destroying his vitality. Behind him, Ling Shiqi panted as he pulled out his iron sword. He kicked Hua 43 to the side and shook his head. After the battle with Blood 36, Ling Shiqi overestimated this teammate of his. This person actually lost his mind when he saw this scene, and made such a fatal mistake. Of course, Ling Shiqi would not let go of this opportunity. He used the confusion steps, wind-blowing willow, and threefold palm to kill him. However, the little bit of spiritual energy he had recovered with great difficulty was almost used up again. Then Ling Shiqi quickly cleaned up the battlefield and took the water bags and weapons from the 3 people. In particular, not only did he retrieve 3 of Blood 36's silver needles, he actually had 2 more on him. As for Hatred 19's giant axe, it was too troublesome to carry, so he sold it to the system for 9 system coins. Ling Shiqi happily accepted Hua 43's black robe. He simply wiped the bloodstains on it, and didn't care about the sword marks on it. He directly put it on himself. It was still a piece of clothing, so it was much better than being wrapped in tree bark. Ling Shiqi looked around, and after confirming that there was no one around, he quietly left. Chapter 11. Back in the tree hole, the first thing Ling Shiqi did was to recover his spiritual energy. About an hour later, Ling Shiqi stopped. He felt that the spiritual energy in his body had increased a little, which was a pleasant surprise. Ling Shiqi checked his injuries. The numbness in his left shoulder and left arm had subsided a little. It seemed that it was only temporary and would disappear completely in about a day. The most troublesome part was his internal injuries. He had forcefully used 2 spiritual techniques at the same time, and the spiritual energy had reversed and damaged his meridians. This could only be slowly healed with spiritual energy. It would probably take 10 days to half a month. During this time, he couldn't use too much spiritual energy. In normal battles, he might only be able to use 70 to 80% of his strength. There's still half a month before the next resource fight. I'll cultivate here in peace, Ling Shiqi thought. Then, Ling Shiqi called out the system and looked at his information. Name, Ling Shiqi, Lu Xingji, Cultivation, Spirit Gathering Level 8 Technique, Level 1 Technique, Mountain Crushing Force, Spiritual Technique, Unranked Spiritual Technique, Threefold Water Palm, Perfect, Unranked Spiritual Technique, Basic Sword Technique, Perfect, Level 1 Spiritual Technique, Enigmatic Footwork, Perfect, Level 1 Spiritual Technique, Willow Swordsmanship, Proficient, System Coins. 21 Ling Shiqi's eyes were fixed on the Willow Swordsmanship and the system coins. He remembered that before he left, he had a negative number of system coins. Now, he had accumulated so much without realizing it. He thought about it and realized that they were all from weapons that were inconvenient to carry around but couldn't bear to throw away. Now, it seemed that it wasn't that hard to obtain system coins. At first, Ling Shiqi didn't plan to feed the system, nor did he plan to do a lottery. However, after being stimulated by Delta Origi and Blood 36, Ling Shiqi realized that his strength was far from enough. Since he had the system coins now, it would be a waste to leave them lying around, so he might as well give it a try. He opened the lottery interface. The beginner lottery was lit up. Ling Shiqi casually clicked Start. He didn't have much hope in his heart. After a flash of light, the system prompt also arrived. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the beginner prize, 1 steel ingot. Then, Ling Shiqi's hands sank, and a palm-sized steel ingot fell into his hand. Ling Shiqi couldn't help but twitch his mouth. Even though he was mentally prepared, he still had the urge to smash this thing. Do you want me to make a living as a blacksmith on Blood Mist Island? Or was he relying on this to defend himself? Alas! Ling Shiqi shook his head and sighed softly. He threw the iron ingot aside and opened the lottery again. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the primary prize. Card, Lightning Arrow, can be used by activating spiritual energy. Oh. Ling Shiqi curiously picked up a pale gold card in his hand. He was very familiar with the picture on it. It was an item from a game called Hearthstone in his previous life. I remember that this card is a shaman card. It's not very applicable. How powerful will it be in the real world? Ling Shiqi whispered. However, he only had one card in his hand and couldn't casually experiment with it. He could only put it away and try it out when he had the chance in the future. This time, he was quite satisfied with the lottery draw. Perhaps it was because his expectations had been lowered. After putting the card away, Ling Shiqi opened the spiritual skill interface again. He clicked level up and his consciousness entered the gray space. After 3 times, Whisking Willow's swordsmanship finally reached the level of perfection. There were many more insights in his mind. His arms and wrists were more powerful, and hard calluses had formed on his palms. Feeling the increase in his strength, Ling Shiqi was very satisfied. Then, he began to carefully reflect on today's actions. At the beginning, he was lucky to encounter the powerful Delta Origi in the fight for the Spirit Stones. Otherwise, it would have been very troublesome to steal from the 3-man team. Because of this, Ling Shiqi felt a sense of urgency. This Blood Fog Island wasn't very big, but it wasn't small either. There were at least dozens of areas like dense forests and wastelands, and this was only the periphery. Were there other people who had also broken through to the pure spirit realm? How many people were there? Therefore, he was looking forward to the 1-month agreement that Delta Origi had mentioned. In addition, what was more worthy of reflection was that he wasn't careful enough and exposed his position by bringing the steel sword and staff. If not, he would have already cultivated Whisking Willow's swordsmanship to perfection, and the subsequent battles wouldn't have been so difficult. When he thought of that hoarse young man, Blood 36, Ling Shiqi couldn't help but feel a trace of fear. That ability to predict his position was too terrifying. There were almost no mediocre people who could survive until now on Blood Fog Island. They also had endless means. Ling Shiqi secretly warned himself not to underestimate any opponent. 3 days later, in the dense forest, Ling Shiqi held his sword and faced a thick, unknown tree. He raised his hand and the light on his sword revolved. At the same time, his feet moved and he instantly arrived in front of the tree. He stabbed out with his sword, leaving a deep sword mark on the tree trunk. At this moment, there were dozens of sword marks on the tree trunk. Ling Shiqi frowned and muttered to himself, failed again. In the past 3 days, Ling Shiqi had been trying to recover the move that killed Blood 36. However, so far, Ling Shiqi could only use Confusion Footwork and Whisking Willow Swordsmanship once. Of course, if this spread out, it would be enough to shock everyone, but he was still not satisfied. This doesn't make sense. Back then, I could only use Whisking Willow Swordsmanship at the proficient realm. Now that I've reached perfection, I can still use it. Ling Shiqi shook his head and was puzzled. At the same time, he secretly rejoiced that he had used Whisking Willow Swordsmanship at the time. Otherwise, he would have most likely been the one to die. There was no other way. No one could help him, not even the system. He could only try again and again. Just like that, day after day passed. Ling Shiqi had been trying to recreate that move. He would only stop to replenish himself when he was hungry or when he ran out of spiritual energy. On the 7th day, Ling Shiqi was already able to use the Confusion Footwork twice while stabbing out with the Wind Blows Willow. On the 10th day, he was able to stab out twice and teleport twice. On the 15th day, he could stab twice and teleport thrice. It was also on this day that the Blood Mist Island once again erupted with cultivation resources, but the Ling Shiqi didn't care about it and didn't fight for it. At this moment, his eyes were red and he looked a little crazy. However, deep in his eyes, there was a frightening clarity. He could feel that he was getting closer to that step. He was already very close. It was so close, but it seemed to be separated by an invisible barrier. It could be seen but could not be touched. Ling Shiqi didn't know how many times he had tried. The tree in front of him was already covered in scars and he couldn't bear to look at it. The closer he got, the more he had no clue. Thus, he stopped and returned to the tree hole to sit cross-legged. He began to recall the state and feeling at that time. It definitely wasn't as simple as the willow sword style and the confusion footwork. Otherwise, he would have already mastered that move. Instead, there was something that had cleverly fused the two spiritual techniques together. If two things could be fused, then at the very least, there had to be a common element between the two. Then what was the common element between the willow sword style and the confusion footwork? Leng Shiqi frowned as he thought, thinking about it. 2 days had passed, which was the 17th day. At this time, Leng Shiqi's eyes were sunken and his lips were white. That's right, he hadn't eaten or drunk for 2 or 3 days. However, his eyes were shining brighter and brighter, as if they were about to burst out. Crack. An invisible sound suddenly appeared in Leng Shiqi's mind. It was as if something had cracked. Then, more and more cracking sounds could be heard. In the end, Leng Shiqi only felt that the clouds in front of him had cleared. He turned around, grabbed his sword, and jumped down the tree hole. Leng Shiqi's willow sword style stabbed at the tree in front of him. Just as he was about to stab the trunk, he actually went through the trunk. Puff puff puff. Leng Shiqi's figure appeared behind the tree. He still maintained his current posture, but 3 sounds came from the trunk at almost the same time. Looking carefully, there were 3 deep sword marks on the left, right, and back of the tree. Finally, I finally succeeded. Leng Shiqi said softly, but his voice was weak. Then, he staggered and almost fell to the ground. Chapter 12. After taking a few breaths, Leng Shiqi hurriedly gathered the last bit of spirit energy in his body, returned to the tree hole, and fell into a deep sleep. He slept for an entire day. When Leng Shiqi woke up, he was awoken by hunger. At the same time, he was a bit scared because sleeping like this was a dangerous thing to do. Leng Shiqi touched his stomach and couldn't help but smile bitterly. However, when he thought about how he had successfully comprehended that move, his eyes were full of excitement. Now, he finally understood the similarity between the willow swordsmanship and the enigmatic footwork, which was also the core, and that was agility. The willow swordsmanship was a sword technique that focused on elegance and agility. Only by truly grasping its essence could the sword technique be used to the extreme. The same was true for the enigmatic footwork. In order to fuse the two, he first had to cultivate the two techniques to a very high level, but the most important thing was to experience agility. Only by using agility to control the techniques could the fusion be successful. Back when he had been able to use this move against Blood 36, luck had played a large part in that. This was because he had only just mastered the willow sword style at the time. Although he wasn't very familiar with it, it was because he was like a blank piece of paper that his understanding of the sword technique was not fixed that he accidentally used it. Later, when he cultivated it to the great perfection stage, it was fixed and lost some of its agility. At this moment, Leng Shiqi even felt that his understanding of the willow swordsmanship and the enigmatic footwork had deepened. However, at the same time, there was a trace of doubt in his heart. The great perfection stage should be the highest level of spiritual techniques. Why is there still room for improvement? Could it be that there is a higher level above the great perfection stage? Then why doesn't the system have a higher level option? Leng Shiqi suddenly felt a headache and quickly threw these thoughts away. He smiled helplessly and said, "It seems that I've been using my brain too much recently. Forget it, let's not think about it anymore. Let's hurry and find something to eat." After saying that, Leng Shiqi simply packed up and left the tree hole. He first picked some wild fruits and leaves to fill his stomach before continuing to walk towards the water source. As he approached the water source, Leng Shiqi slowed down. Even if he was dying of thirst, he had to hide and observe first. After a while, Leng Shiqi saw that there were no traces of other people or demon beasts. He vigilantly walked to the edge of the pool and took a few big gulps of water. Phew. Leng Shiqi exhaled. Comfortable. However, at the moment when he was the most relaxed, a sharp sound of air being torn apart came from behind him. Ambush. Leng Shiqi's heart suddenly quivered. He didn't even turn his head. He continuously used the confusing footwork and teleported more than 20 feet away. When he turned around, he saw a scrawny young man with a scar on his face standing where Leng Shiqi had been just a moment ago with his hands clawed. Body type spiritual technique. The young man's eyes were filled with surprise. He made a prompt decision and turned to run. "Humph, at least you're smart." Leng Shiqi coldly snorted in his heart. He was always the one who ambushed others, but today, he was almost pecked in the eye by Yen. However, he admired the young man's action of immediately retreating when the ambush failed. Leng Shiqi did not chase after him. He had already observed for a long time in advance. There was indeed no one nearby. The young man most likely just happened to come to the pool and saw an opportunity to attack. Moreover, under normal circumstances, there would be at least 2 people coming to get water. The others might be hiding somewhere to ambush him. The most important thing now was to get water. Leng Shiqi immediately took the water bag and put it in the pool. His head was constantly turning to prevent another ambush. However, what Leng Shiqi did not expect was that 2 figures directly ran out from the forest behind him. One of them was the young man with a scar. He was immediately stunned. Since when did sneak attacks become so open and aboveboard? However, Leng Shiqi immediately rejected this idea. The 2 people's panicked faces did not look like they were here to ambush him. There are beasts. The demonic beasts are coming. They've blocked our escape route. The 2 of them shouted in panic. However, Leng Shiqi's expression did not change and continued to fill the water. "Brother, I was wrong to ambush you just now. But if it were you, you would definitely do the same, wouldn't you? Why don't the 3 of us work together to defeat the beasts first? After we escape, I, Mu Si, will be your slave." The young man with a scar hurriedly said. He knew that Leng Shiqi had a body movement technique and would have no problem holding back the beasts. Leng Shiqi finished filling the 2 water bags and tied them to his waist. He turned around and looked at Mu Si calmly. However, it was this calm gaze that made Mu Si's heart go numb. At this moment, a beast as tall as a cow with 4 huge hooves walked over. When it saw Leng Shiqi and the other 2, its eyes suddenly glowed red and it rushed over crazily. "It's the Iron Hoof Beast," Leng Shiqi thought. The majestic Iron Hoof Beast galloped over. The other young man's cultivation was not high and was only at the 6th level of the Spirit Assembly realm. He was already scared out of his wits and his legs were trembling at this moment. Bang! Crack! The Iron Hoof Beast knocked him into a big tree and he fell limply to the ground. It looked like he could not hold on for much longer. Leng Shiqi did not see this scene, because before the demonic beasts attacked him, he had already run away. Mu Si followed closely behind. "Why, not going to save your teammates?" Leng Shiqi's expression was calm and he even had the leisure to make sarcastic remarks. "Humph, this kind of coward is lucky to be able to live until now." Mu Si snorted coldly. He did not look like he should have when his teammates died tragically. Instead, he was glad that his teammates' death bought him time to escape. Boom boom boom, a heavy sound came from behind. Mu Si turned around and his expression changed drastically. "The beasts are chasing us. They're so fast." Leng Shiqi also looked over and saw the Iron Hoof Beast galloping over on all 4s. "Brother, it's been hard on you." "What?" Mu Si had yet to turn his head back when he heard this sentence ringing in his ears. Before he could react, a strong force slapped him on his body. Mu Si flew out and fell to the ground. 3 streams of spirit energy entered his body and destroyed his meridians, causing him to be unable to stand up for a while. At this moment, he finally understood what Leng Shiqi meant. Unfortunately, it was too late. You'll die a horrible death." Mu Si saw that the Iron Hoof Beast's hooves were already in front of him and roared with a ferocious expression. Leng Shiqi naturally did not care. Other than the people who could survive to the end on Blood Fog Island, everyone else would die a horrible death. Moreover, Ling Shiqi did not forget about his previous sneak attack. Mu Si more or less bought some time for Ling Shiqi. At this time, Ling Shiqi's fine iron sword was pointed diagonally. His eyes closed and opened, and he quickly entered a magical world. Just as the iron hoof beast trampled Mu Si to death, Ling Shiqi moved. With a fleeting sword, he appeared in front of the iron hoof beast in a flash. The iron hoof beast was not afraid at all. It swung its head and bit with its mouth, but it only bit air. Ling Shiqi's figure was already gone. In the next moment, a few sword lights flashed and Ling Shiqi suddenly appeared behind the iron hoof beast. He held the sword with the tip of the sword pointed backwards, and the blade was stained with blood. The iron hoof beast was still looking around in confusion. As it looked, its huge head fell to the ground, and scarlet blood spurted out like a fountain. One move, and the beast was killed instantly. Although the iron hoof beast was only the lowest level of beast, and its body was not very strong, it still needed at least 3 people at the 7th or 8th level of the spirit gathering realm to be able to kill it. At this moment, it was killed by Ling Shiqi in one move. The power of this move was probably not even a 2nd level spiritual technique. Moving in all directions, 3 swords in an instant, unpredictable. Ling Shiqi called this move, chaotic flowers gradually bewildering the eyes. Chapter 13. Ling Shiqi didn't look at the carcass of the iron hoof beast. He adjusted the spirit energy in his body and prepared to leave. Such a strong smell of blood would soon attract other beasts. Even though he wasn't afraid, there was no benefit in killing the beasts. It was purely a waste of effort. Moreover, the 2 people who died didn't have anything valuable on them. It could be said that he gained nothing from this battle. Just as he was about to leave, Ling Shiqi's body paused, as if he remembered something. Walking to the headless carcass of the iron hoof beast, Ling Shiqi called out the system. A line of words appeared in front of him, worth 11 system coins. Sell? Yes. Then the carcass of the iron hoof beast suddenly disappeared without a trace, leaving only a large, ferocious head. So it can be like this. It's not like I didn't gain anything. Ling Shiqi muttered and immediately left. As he walked, he felt the spirit energy in his body. Mesmerizing flowers consumed about 30% of his spirit energy. In addition, it put a lot of burden on his body. However, he wasn't dissatisfied. Instead, he was even more excited. Because this could be said to be a technique that he created himself. Although the foundation was the wicker swordsmanship and confusion footwork, combining them was still a self-created technique, wasn't it? At this moment, Ling Shiqi was thinking about more. The reason why he was able to cultivate several spiritual techniques to perfection was because of the system's help. Even though he had witnessed the cultivation process in the gray space, he still felt that it was unreal. For example, the wicker swordsmanship and confusion footwork. His understanding of these 2 spiritual techniques was deeper than the system's. This was something that truly belonged to him. This was even more so for the technique he comprehended. This technique was completely his own. From the beginning, Ling Shiqi was a bit wary of the system. If he didn't have the system now, and it took away what he obtained from the system. But it couldn't take away his own understanding and understanding. It couldn't take away what he comprehended. Yes. He could still use this technique. When Ling Shiqi thought of this, the haze in his heart dissipated a lot. He was very happy and almost wanted to laugh a few times, but he held it back. Soon, Ling Shiqi crawled into the dark, damp tree hole. His heart, however, calmed down, as if he had returned to a warm home. Ling Shiqi casually put aside the water bag and the bag of food, then took out 2 stones that were glowing with a faint light from his bosom. They were spirit stones. Ling Shiqi gently rubbed the 2 spirit stones in his hand and said to himself, "There are only 12 or 13 days left until the 1-month agreement with the Delta Origi. I have to hurry." When he comprehended the move, mesmerizing flowers, although he did not wholeheartedly devote himself to cultivation, every time he used up his spiritual chi and recovered it, his cultivation would improve a little. It was actually faster than meditating and cultivating. With a rank 1 technique, Ling Shiqi's spirit chi was not far from the 9th level of the spirit gathering realm. As long as he absorbed these 2 spiritual stones, he would be able to advance to the 9th level of the spirit gathering realm. 11 days later. The black robe on Ling Shiqi's body suddenly fluttered. Then, he stopped cultivating and opened his eyes, revealing a hint of joy. Success. At this moment, his cultivation had reached the 9th level of the spirit-gathering realm. At least I didn't break my promise. It's about time to prepare to leave. Ling Shiqi muttered and simply packed up. Actually, there was nothing much. He wrapped up the food and tied the water bag to his waist. Then, he carried the fine iron sword on his back, tied the dagger to his ankle, and hid the 5 silver needles in his sleeve. Finally, he hid the card, golden sore medicine, and spirit recovery powder close to his body. As for the steel ingot, it would be a treasure to guard the house. At this moment, Ling Shiqi opened the system and saw his own information, name, Ling Shiqi, Lu Xingji, cultivation, 9th level of the spirit gathering realm technique, rank 1 technique, mountain shattering force, spiritual skill, unranked spiritual skill, triple water ripple palm, peak, unranked spiritual skill, basic sword technique, peak, rank 1 spiritual skill, enigmatic footwork, peak, rank 1 spiritual skill, whisking willow sword form, peak, system coins, 12. Before leaving, Ling Shiqi decided to draw another prize. Perhaps he could get something good. Not long after, Ling Shiqi left the tree hole. There was an extra book called Intimate Paradise in the tree hole. There was only a little more than a day left until the appointed time. Ling Shiqi planned to go to the barren land and scout the area. At the same time, he was also puzzled because he couldn't think of anything good in the barren land. Just like its name, the withered lands were called withered lands because that area was completely barren, with only wild grass left. Of course, it wasn't that there were no traces of people. Some cultivation resources would occasionally fall there. Naturally, there would be people fighting for them. Speaking of which, in 2 days, it would be time for the barren land to erupt with cultivation resources. If there were any items nearby, he could try to fight for them. After leaving the tree hole, Ling Shiqi first went to the pond to bring enough water. Along the way, he also picked some edible fruits. This time, it went very smoothly. Not long after, Ling Shiqi arrived at the barren land. The entire barren land was overgrown with weeds that were half a person's height. A few withered trees stood scattered around. It was a desolate place. There's not even a place to hide? Observing the surroundings, Ling Shiqi couldn't help but frown. Who's there? Suddenly, Ling Shiqi heard footsteps behind him and immediately went into battle mode. So it's you. Ling Shiqi turned around and saw that it was Delta Origi. Delta Origi's expression was a little strange. She looked like she was making a fuss about nothing. Ling Shiqi could only cough lightly. Ahem, it's never wrong to be cautious. You didn't miss the appointment and came early. Delta Origi walked over and said softly. Of course, now can you tell me what it is? Ling Shiqi was very concerned about what he was about to do. It's a long story. Let me ask you first, have you ever been to the inner area of Blood Mist Island? Delta Origi walked in front of him and asked in a deep voice. Inner area? Ling Shiqi's eyes widened slightly. Blood Mist Island indeed had outer area, inner area, and central area. The central area was the small mountain where the blood-colored tower was built. There was actually no obvious boundary between the outer area and the inner area. Everyone was divided according to the rank of the monster beast. The area where low-level monster beasts appeared could be said to be the outer area. If a true rank 1 monster beast appeared in an area, it would be considered the inner area. A rank 1 monster beast was equivalent to a spirit cultivator in the pure spirit realm. Moreover, monster beasts were naturally stronger than humans. An ordinary spirit cultivator in the pure spirit realm would not be able to face a rank 1 monster beast alone. Ling Shiqi had only heard of it and had never gone too deep. He had only been wandering around the outer area. He immediately shook his head. Delta Origi pondered for a moment and said, "There are indeed many rank 1 monsters in the inner area. This is something that many people know, so they shrink back. But they don't know that other than the powerful monster beasts, there are even more precious resources inside. Just the cultivation resources that fall into the inner area are not small. This is only secondary. What's more precious is that there will be some heaven and earth treasures. So that's how it is, hmm? You've been to the inner area?" Ling Shiqi could not help but be shocked when he heard this and asked. "That's right. Otherwise, where do you think my cultivation came from?" "By bitter cultivation?" Delta Origi tilted her head slightly and said indifferently. Chapter 14. When Ling Shiqi heard Delta Origi's words, waves rose in his heart. So, Delta Origi broke into the inner area when she was still in the spirit-gathering realm. It was also because she obtained a large amount of cultivation materials that she quickly broke through to the pure spirit realm. Hiss. Ling Shiqi secretly sucked in a breath of cold air. At the same time, he couldn't help but admire the little girl in front of him. Ling Shiqi had always thought that he was already crazy enough. But he didn't expect that this Delta Origi was even crazier than him. Delta Origi's cultivation that far exceeded that of ordinary people didn't come from nothing, it was exchanged with her life. "You really are a crazy woman." Ling Shiqi couldn't help but say this sentence. However, Delta Origi didn't care when she heard it. Instead, she gently smiled and said, "If I don't go crazy, how can I survive on Blood Mist Island? Then, are you willing to go crazy with me?" Ling Shiqi's eyes slightly shrank as he looked at Delta Origi's smile. That smile seemed to contain countless tribulations and unknown bitterness. What had this little girl, who was only about 12 years old, experienced? After a short while, Ling Shiqi softly said a word, "Okay." He understood that Delta Origi, an opponent that even a pure spirit realm expert couldn't defeat, was either an expert of the pure spirit realm or a rank 1 monster beast. But he still agreed, not for anyone else, but for himself. Because only by going to the inner area could he possibly break through to the pure spirit realm as soon as possible. "You don't want to think about it?" Delta Origi raised her eyebrows. Obviously, she didn't expect Ling Shiqi to agree so quickly. "If I didn't have the determination to go, I wouldn't have come here." "Okay, you can rest assured. If this matter is done, you will only be one step away from the pure spirit realm. Let's go." Delta Origi turned and walked in a direction after saying that. "Where are we going?" Ling Shiqi gathered his thoughts and asked curiously. "Let's find a place to settle down and talk slowly. Then, we'll prepare some things and rest for the night. We'll act tomorrow." With that, the Delta Origi turned around and left. Ling Shiqi followed. At night, the two of them were already in a dense forest. The two of them worked together to set up a small area at the top of a few towering trees. There were branches and leaves all over the place, making it a good place to spend the night. The two of them didn't have much to say to each other. Perhaps it was because they had stayed on the Blood Mist Island for too long that they had become a man of few words. However, Ling Shiqi still didn't know what they were going to do, so he couldn't help but feel a little uneasy, so he asked. "Now you can tell me what you're going to do." Delta Origi nodded and said softly. "I've mentioned to you before that the inner circle not only drops cultivation resources, but also rare treasures. Not long ago, I found a spirit fruit tree by chance. I don't know what kind of spirit fruit it is, but I can feel the rich spirit chi it emits from far away. The spirit chi contained in that spirit fruit is probably much more than 10 spirit stones." Ling Shiqi's eyes couldn't help but light up when he heard this. There's actually such a treasure in the Blood Mist Island. If he could really get such a spirit fruit, he didn't need a lot, just one. Coupled with hard work, he believed that it wouldn't take long for him to break through to the pure spirit realm. However, there's a rank 1 monster beast under the spirit fruit tree. It's a kind of monster beast that looks like a cheetah. Its whole body is covered with blood spots. I call it the blood-spotted leopard. I once fought with it to test its strength. Its speed is extremely fast, so I fell into a passive position as soon as I fought with it. I also paid a price to escape. Delta Origi continued, but her tone began to become dignified. In addition, I also found that there seems to be other people who are also interested in this spirit fruit tree. There are other people? Ling Shiqi frowned when he heard this. Yes, there are many capable people in the Blood Mist Island. Even if it's me, it's nothing. I've already met 3 pure spirit realm cultivators in the inner circle. Naturally, there are still those I haven't met yet. As time passes, there will only be more and more spirit cultivators in the pure spirit realm. In addition, there are also some bold 9th level spirit gathering realm cultivators who will join forces to explore. Ling Shiqi's heart sank when he heard this. The joy brought by comprehending dazzling flowers and breaking through to the 9th level of the spirit gathering realm completely dissipated. He, who was at the 9th level of the spirit gathering realm, was even more clear that there was still a long way to go before he could break through to the pure spirit realm. And now, there were already many spirit cultivators who had reached the pure spirit realm. Once they broke through to the pure spirit realm, they would have the qualifications to enter the inner circle. The large amount of resources in the inner circle would allow them to grow stronger faster, leaving behind the people behind them. Ling Shiqi secretly scolded himself for being short-sighted in the past. He only dared to move around in the outer circle and had never thought of going to the inner circle. If it weren't for the appointment with the Delta Origi this time, he was afraid that it would take a while for him to remember. At that time, there wouldn't even be soup left. Then what do you need me to do? Ling Shiqi withdrew all his thoughts and asked a question seriously. Tomorrow, it will be the time for cultivation materials to erupt again. There will also be some in the inner circle. At that time, I hope to attract the attention of others and we will take the opportunity to pick the spirit fruit. Are you the only one who knows the location of the spirit fruit tree? Not necessarily, so you must be extremely careful. Tomorrow, I will be in charge of the main attack and lure the demonic beast away. After that, you can go and pick the spirit fruit. After you succeed, you can directly run to the current place. I will think of a way to escape. When Ling Shiqi heard this, he suddenly thought of a question and said, "Oh? You trust me that much? Aren't you afraid that I will take it all for myself?" "I believe you." Ling Shiqi's heart moved when he heard this. Just as he was about to say something, the Delta Origi slowly said the second half of the sentence. "I wouldn't dare." When Ling Shiqi heard this, the corner of his eyes couldn't help twitching a few times. But then he smiled and said, Okay, you are in the pure spirit realm, of course I wouldn't dare. Don't worry, I haven't lived enough, I will act according to the plan. You rest first, I will keep watch." The Delta Origi didn't refuse, nodded slightly, and sat cross-legged to cultivate. The night was silent. The next day, Ling Shiqi and the Delta Origi simply ate and drank a little before setting off. The more Ling Shiqi walked, the more a strange feeling rose in his heart. It was not fear, not nervousness, but a faint sense of excitement. The excitement and expectation of adventure and challenge. As the two of them gradually made their way into the inner area, Ling Shiqi sensed something different. For example, the fog seemed to be a little thicker, the surrounding plants were taller and greener, and some wild fruits and the like looked very delicious. Even the spirit chi was more and more rich. The resources in the inner area were much better than he imagined. Of course, the danger was also much higher. Not to mention other things, just the first-order monster was not something that ordinary people could deal with. As they walked, there was suddenly a loud bang in the sky. Ling Shiqi looked up, and as he thought, dozens of boxes of different colors bloomed like fireworks and scattered in all directions. The blood-colored tower began to erupt with cultivation resources again. It was just a little strange that he seemed to see the blood-colored light curtain above the dome seemed to be distorted. When he looked again, there was no movement. Did I see it wrong? Ling Shiqi thought, you're tuning into the Dreamy Love Stories YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.